Welcome back to my channel. So sorry for any background noise, that is my tumble dryer which is constantly on. So today's video is all about girl talk. So I just wanted to go through my experiences about hormone changes and kind of everything that happens to like your menstrual cycle and all of that fun stuff after you have children and contraception and basically like girl talk. So I thought I would talk about this because I don't really see it talking about that much, and I think it's something that does affect us ladies quite a lot. So I just thought I would share how my experience has gone since having children. So before I had kids, I had really regular periods, very standard, 5-6 days. I mean, they've always been more on the heavier side, but there was never anything concerning. And then after I had my first daughter, obviously your body changes and everything. And I did find that, things were a little bit heavier in that department, but nothing, overly concerning. And then after I had my second child, I did struggle quite a lot, and eventually I was diagnosed with like a bleeding syndrome, which basically just meant that every time I tried to go on like forms of contraception, I would pretty much bleed and have a lot of breakthrough bleeding. So not just spotting, it would be like being on all the time. And it was very frustrating. So in the end, I actually went through pretty much every pill out there. And then I did go on to the injection. I also had both of the types of coil that you can have. And none of them worked out very well. So I don't want to, put anybody off. But my experiences of the coils weren't the best. The first one I had done, which I believe was like the coppery one, when they went to take it out, because I actually had quite a bad reaction to that coil, and when they went to take it out, the way that they take it out, they couldn't do it the way they were meant to do it, so I had to basically go in and have an operation, which was not fun. And then when I had like the marina coil, or whatever it's called, like the plastic one, the string, so the string that they use and to like remove it and everything, that disappeared. So I went into like not a hospital, but like a clinic environment, and this really lovely lady, actually, she tried her very best to remove it, but unfortunately I had to have another operation to get that one out. And each time, obviously they worked in preventing pregnancy, but basically with both of the coils I bled so heavy I was actually losing like a tissue from the womb and everything. It was quite, this isn't, I don't just mean a heavy period, I mean like, can't get out of bed period. It was quite bad. And they just said that it was like hormone changes. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but every time you have a baby, your body actually like kind of like resets. I don't know if that's like the right medical term, but that's how it was described to me. So yeah, I've always struggled like only after having children, like not too much after my first, but definitely after I had my second child. I've really struggled then to find contraception, and then I went on the implant, and the implant is known for being really good if you're having like hormonal issues and things. It is a very good form of contraception. I believe it is like the highest, one when it comes to like preventing pregnancy. And it lasts 3 years, so it's very convenient. It just goes in your arm, you don't have to think about it, do you know what I mean? So it's very convenient in that way. But I will say, like with me, it did obviously work to prevent pregnancy, but I was still bleeding, so I wasn't like as bad as I was like with the pills or the coils or the like depo injection or anything. But it was the only one I found that I had any type of normality when it came to periods. Again, though, it was very unpredictable, and I was actually on that form of contraception for 9 years. Well, it would have been 8 years because I did have like the third one I had. So I had it put it in and taken it out by 3 times, and they last for 3 years. So technically they last longer, I think, but they like you to like change out every 3 years. So when I went to have it like taken out the third time, I went early because I just came to the realization that I just needed a break from contraception. It wasn't just the bleeding, I was like, wasn't myself hormonally. And like, even though like the implant helped in that I wasn't bleeding as much, usually like if you haven't got these issues, normally something like that, you wouldn't have a period, which is what every woman wants. Do you know what I mean? Ooh, unless you want to have a child, periods are just an annoyance to get in the way, let's be real. So yeah, but it wasn't just, it wasn't just the bleeding side of things, it was a hormonal, I didn't feel like me, I was always like hormonal basically. It was basically, the only way I can describe it, it was like being on all the time, and those few days before you start period when you're angry and really unhappy, basically it was like that, but constantly. So, you know, not a fun time. So I did have a break from contraception, and then I tried using things like, well, not doing anything basically, because at the time obviously I didn't want to become pregnant and everything. And then I went and had a chat with my doctor, and because at this point I had, so this is before Phoebe, my youngest, was born, so I went and had a chat with my doctor, and because literally my whole file of like my medical file is like one huge section of all the different contraceptions I used, and then the other side is like my IBD and all everything that I've gone through with that, which is a whole other thing on its own. But that's literally all my medical history is about. So I looked back with my medical history, seeing like all the issues that I was having and everything, and they did actually say that I would be like eligible to have you know, be sterilised then basically, which I did consider at the time. Obviously now I'm glad I didn't go through with that, and when they offered me that, that was when, you know, so this is like going back a long time ago then, so that's when they said if, you know, the implant didn't work, so that's when I first had the implant. They said if it didn't work they'd offer me a sterilisation because of all the contraception issues that I did have. And then even though it did work, obviously I decided to take a break for a while. That is how we ended up with Phoebe. Which of course now, you know, you're never going to regret your children. She is amazing. And, you know, obviously if you're not on contraception, there's always a chance you're going to get pregnant. Do you know what I mean? We all know this, we're all adults. But it was more, it wasn't just, you know, it wasn't just a period thing for me and a bleeding thing. It was a mental health thing as well, you know. When I think if you've been on for that long, literally I was on a period for like years, and I couldn't, you know, contraception is supposed to, yeah, stop you getting pregnant. But a lot of women, I think, choose to use it to help regulate themselves, and it just wasn't doing anything. I mean, obviously, if you're on all the time, you're not getting pregnant anyway, you know. And I just felt like, you know, obviously I've had, you know, the other girls as well to take into consideration, and it was just something I chose for myself. I was like, you know, no one wants to be in that situation, do you know what I mean? So yeah. So now obviously, you know, I've had little Phoebe and everything. I'm not on like proper contraception at the moment. I just use like the app thing that you can get. So I know what you can do is in Natural Cycles, I believe you pay for that one, and it was like a monthly subscription. And then you take your temperature and everything, and it tells you if you're, you know, fertile or not. But I just use like the free trackers, and it tells you, you know, when you're fertile, because, you know, since having so many issues with hormonal contraception, I've looked into more of, you know, just tracking and, you know, Natural Cycles, and I've looked for ones that you don't have to pay for, because I don't think you should have to pay for it, do you know what I mean? I just think that's a little bit frustrating, you know, things like that should be available to everybody. It's not expensive, but I just, yeah. So, you know, you can track your cycles, and obviously, you know, a woman's cycle, you can only, your fertile days are only so many, you're not as likely to get pregnant, you know, just after or just before a period. Obviously, there's always going to be a chance, you know what I mean? But you can, you know, after you track it, so I didn't use it as a form of contraception then until I tracked it, so that, because Snap at the end of the day, so you put your information in, it tracks your cycle, and then it gets to know your cycle, if that makes sense, and it can tell you like your fertile days. So that's what I do. But I would say, you know, if you are struggling with contraception and you are worried, you know, obviously about pregnancy and things like that, I would say that, you know, yes, it, you know, is scary, but I think it was the best decision that I ever made coming off contraception. Even if you just have a little break and you just don't do anything, which I know is, you know, but easier said than done sometimes, but you got to think of yourself as well. If you are in a situation like I was, where you're always bleeding, do you know what I mean, and you don't feel like yourself, I think, you know, you've got to take your mental health into consideration, as well as like trying not to get pregnant. And maybe you and your partner or husband or whatever need to have that conversation. And if you are really against having more children, then maybe they could go in for a vasectomy if that's something you wanted to discuss. To be honest, I'd be quite happy, you know, if we came to the decision that we never wanted to have any more children. I'd be quite happy to go ahead and be sterilised. It's not something that would bother me, you know. not that I'm saying that my partner hasn't said, he said, you know, he would have a vasectomy, do you know what I mean? But, you know, you can't predict the future. So now, like back then, that's how, and now I look at little Phoebe and I think, oh, wouldn't it be lovely for her to have like a sibling, because she's, you know, there's such a big age gap between them, you know. So if you just clicked on this video, hello. So maybe I'm in the UK and I have 3 children, all girls, and I also have a stepdaughter who's also a girl. So the oldest, so she is the oldest and she's 18, and then Jessica is 17, Izzy is 12, almost 13, and then I have little Phoebe who's 10 months old, and I just think it'd be really nice for her to have a little brother or sister, because I always think like children don't stay children, they grow up. And with hindsight now of having like a 17-year-old now, and you know, looking back, I do wish that the girls were closer in age, like the older girls then. So Izzy and Jess, there's 4 years between them. So now I'm thinking, you know, it would be nice for Phoebes to have a sibling. What I'm trying to say is you just never know what your future is going to be like, and I would say never to having more children, because I've always said that, and you just never know. And now I can't imagine little Phoebe not being here, obviously. So I would say if you are worried about that and you feel like you're not being pressured, but you're putting the pressure on yourself, if you really are struggling with your contraception, take a break, because you won't regret it, I promise. And if you feel like you really don't want to have more children, then I would discuss it with your partner. And if you've decided between you, for whatever reason, that you don't want to go down like the permanent route of having either a vasectomy or being sterilised, I would just not do anything, or use condoms, which we all know how good they are. So you know what I mean, I would consider it, even if you just took a little bit of a break, because I truly think that if I had carried on, you know, contraception, I just don't think I would have been very happy, basically. And it was really getting me down, you know. Just think of like having the worst period that you ever had for like years. I was literally on bleeding for like a year, and then I'd have like a little break and then I'd come on. It was never predictable, so I could never do anything, I could never plan anything. I was always in, you know, sanitary towels constantly, and it was sad, to be honest. And it wasn't just that, it was like I was like so hormonal, and I didn't feel like myself emotionally either. So that's the point to go to. And I don't want to like scare anybody off contraception. The implant, they're all very, very good, you know what I mean? And before I had children, they work so well for me. I just think that, you know, hormones, having children, your body changes so much, and some people end up with issues and some people don't. And some people do have issues with contraception. Like my oldest daughter, she's struggling to find one that suits her, and she's looking for something because her periods are quite bad, so she's looking for something to help, you know, on a monthly cycle and everything. So I just think that it's good to talk about it, and, you know, if you've taken a break and then you've become pregnant, or, you know, you're not doing certain things, you know what I mean, then don't feel bad about it. I think there's a lot of pressure, isn't there? Because, you know, as women, we're the ones that tend to deal with contraception. I don't think that'll change anytime soon, if I'm honest. So I just wanted to make this video and say that, you know, you're not alone. I've had very, very major issues with contraception in the past. Luckily, I've been fine for many years, but in the past I have had some issues, and it's not pleasant, do you know what I mean? And I know, you know, everybody makes their own decision when it comes to like contraception, if they use it, if they don't want to use it. But I do think like the app is something that, you know, it can work for you. I just use like the free ones, and it has been working for me. And I think just having that information, like I do think that, like when you're in school, when you're taught about, you know, like your body and things like that, and they have the discussions with you, I do think that, you know, the girls should be taught more. I feel like until I had issues, until I started having children, I didn't really know much about my cycle. And now that I've come off contraception and I'm using like a cycle tracker thing to try, you know, as contraception, I suppose, then, you know, I've looked into it more, and I feel like I'm more aware of my body and things. And I know for me personally, I had no idea that you could only get pregnant certain times of your cycle and things. I mean, which sounds ridiculous because I've had 3 children, but that's something that I learned like just before Phoebe was born, do you know what I mean? And she's only like 10 months old, so yeah. But anyway, I just thought I would make this quick video But I just wanted to chat with you guys, have a bit of girl talk. So that is like the main thing that I've had, and like now that I've had Phoebe, I guess I've like reset, or whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? Like I used to suffer really bad with like really bad hormonal acne, but now it's a lot calmer than it used to be. And I don't use skin. I know that like the skincare thing is like huge right now. To be honest, I use a flannel and warm water. I'm very basic. A moisturiser, that's all I use. I've never been like a huge skincare person. I've never like suffered with like spots, acne and things. I've only ever had hormonal acne around having children. So luckily that's quite under control at the moment. I used to plaster myself in makeup, I've got to be honest. But I don't know if that's an age thing as well. In my 20s, I would never leave the house without makeup. Not like major loads of it, but I would have like foundation and mascara on and things, maybe like lip gloss. But now I've just relaxed about it, and I think, you know, I mean, I'm 38 now, do you know what I mean? So I'm like more like, you know, this is me and that's that, you know what I mean? So yeah, but I don't know, I just think that contraception, hormones, periods, you know, everything that we go through after having children, your body changes as well, everything like that. I just didn't really talk about very much. So just kind of wanted to make this like girly, chatty video. And then, you know, if you guys would like to, if you've had like issues like contraception or things changing after having children, or because I know it's very common. I think like hormonal problems, contraception, like bleeding, breakthrough bleeding and things like that, and IBS is very, very common after you've had kids, and obviously things change, your body changes a lot, goes through a lot. So I just wanted to make this video and say that if it's happening to you, if you're struggling, then you're not alone. And it will get better, it does get better, I promise. There is light at the end of the tunnel now. Luckily, you know, like I said, I use like an app tracker, and I don't know if it's because, you know, I've had Phoebe, so obviously after I've had children, things can change anyway. But I would be very, very hesitant to go back on contraception, because obviously after you have a child, that's usually what a midwife will ask you. And like your 6 weeks, when they check you over and things like that, they say, oh, you know, what are you thinking of contraception, things like that. But yeah, I would say don't feel pressured, you know, if you've had bad experiences, don't feel pressured to go back onto things and things like that. Yeah, but I would say, you know, if you are thinking of alternatives, do your research on like app tracking, and, you know, if you wanted to go through the natural cycles and try that app, you could. I don't use it personally, I just use the free version, but I've heard very good things about that. So, you know, it's just nice to have another option to think of. It was very like, is this really going to work? But to be able to track it's like, I think the more like knowledge is power, isn't it? And just researching it and making sure that you're aware of your body and things. And even if you are on contraception, or you're not on contraception, maybe you're single, do you know what I mean, and you've had issues in the past, and knowing and like when your period is due is always going to be handy, isn't it? But being able to actually track your cycle and learn about your ovulation, and, you know, when you can and can't get pregnant. I mean, can't is a silly word, you know, there's always a chance. But I just found it really, really helpful, and just learning about it just made me feel better about myself, like knowing your own body a bit more. Anyway, so sorry if I rambled on too much. I just wanted to kind of do a girl talky type of a video and chat through some like hormonal issues that I've had and things like that. So I hope you found this interesting and relatable and everything, and thank you so much for listening to me blabbering on. I really, really appreciate it, and I really hope that I will see you in my next one. Bye!